So now that we've finally seen more of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, following the new trailer that was dropped last week at the 2023 Summer Game Fest, we have a better idea of just how massive the game is going to be. We now know that Cloud and his companions will make it at least as far as Cosmo Canyon, given that we got a short glimpse of the scene that takes place in the observatory there. Apart from that, the trailer also revealed that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will cover 2 gameplay discs, suggesting that the game is certainly going to cover a lot of ground, and perhaps more than some of us were initially expecting. This got me wondering about just how much of the story Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will include, and what the potential ending point for the game could be, given that we also know that the Remake project as a whole will encompass 3 games. But before I carry on, just a heads up that there is some spoilery stuff coming up in case you haven't played the original Final Fantasy VII. After it was confirmed last year that the overall Final Fantasy VII Remake project would be a trilogy, the first thing that came to my mind for where Rebirth would finish off was that the game's dramatic conclusion would probably take place in the Forgotten City. The events that take place there are, of course, arguably the most iconic part of Final Fantasy VII, known about even by people who've never played it, and fall at the end of what was the first disc of the original game. Getting as far as the Forgotten City would still cover a lot of ground, but would also leave plenty of story left to cover in the third part of the trilogy. I still think there's a good chance that the game's creators will have chosen that as the dramatic final act with which to end Rebirth, and that's before taking into account the potential timeline shenanigans and story alterations that could change the way things play out compared to the original Final Fantasy VII anyway. Even taking into account the game's increased size when compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake, if it followed a similar 18-chapter structure that could nicely fit in the following major story aspects from the original game. Chapter 1, the calm flashback. Chapter 2, the Chocobo farm, potentially the battle against the Midgar Zolom and on to the Mithril mine. Chapter 3, travelling through the mine and fighting the Turks at the end of it. Chapter 4, meeting Yuffie in the Junon region, potentially going to Fort Condor and on to Juna. Chapter 5, under Junon and the battle against Bottom Swell, and then up to Junon itself before heading to the ship. Chapter 6, travelling on the ship and fighting Jenova once more, perhaps with some additional bits thrown in. Chapter 7, in and around Costa del Sol and then onto Mount Coral. Chapter 8, travelling through the Coral region and reaching the Gold Saucer. Chapter 9, fun and games at the Gold Saucer, meeting Kate Sith there, and getting thrown into the prison. Chapter 10, exploring the Coral prison, and then Barrett's boss fight with Dyne. Chapter 11, travelling through the wilderness and heading to Cosmo Canyon via Gongaga. Chapter 12 in Cosmo Canyon itself, then into the cave and finishing with the boss fight there. Chapter 13, onwards to Nibelheim, meeting our sleepy pal Vincent and heading through Mount Nibel. Chapter 14, reaching Rocket Town, meeting Sid, drinking some damn tea and fighting Palmer, as well as maybe the Turks and even Rufus again. Chapter 15, going to Wutai and all of the potential side quest shenanigans there. Chapter 16, heading back to the Gold Saucer, the famous date scenes and losing the Keystone. Chapter 17, heading to the Temple of the Ancients and fighting the damn Demon's Gate. Chapter 18, heading to the Forgotten City and, well, you know the rest, before finishing with another boss battle against Jenova and potentially Sephiroth too as the final boss. I don't know about you, but to me that still seems like a lot of events to cover in 18 chapters, before even thinking about where the potential additional story elements could come into it. That's why I think it could still end after the City of the Ancients, with the next game after Final Fantasy VII Rebirth beginning with the journey to the North Crater. But hey, that's enough from me. What are your thoughts on how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will play out? Do you think the game will get as far as the events in the Forgotten City? Or do you think the story will actually go beyond that? Drop your comments below. Also, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up as well. And why not subscribe as well if you aren't already? Until next time, thanks for watching.